So, Slate Digital have released a new transient shaping plugin for their mix rack, plainly called Transient Shaper. For those unaware of this type of tool, here we have a typical waveform of a snare drum. This type of plugin allows the user to sculpt and define the initial attack of a sound, and conversely, either tame or pronounce the tail of a sound. A tool like this is great for helping your drums stick out in a dense mix, giving electronic producers a convenient way to shape bass stabs and mold percussive sounds, and it's useful for taming or chopping off a rogue, harsh guitar pluck that would otherwise bother the listener. These are just a few examples of what you can do with this type of plugin. While there's other methods of dealing with the issues I've outlined, having a fast, specialized tool with dead simple to understand controls is always appealing. Of course, none of this matters if it doesn't perform well and sounds flat and sucks the life out of everything it touches, so let's put it through its paces and see if it helps me stay on board with Slate Digital's sometimes annoying subscription service and adherence to iLok. But more on that at the end of the video. The timing of this release is perfect because I can try it out on this new song I'm finishing up for an upcoming string of videos for this channel's creative series. First, I'm going to test this out on a kick and snare drum. And as you can see, this is a pretty dense mix. It's got a lot of elements. The goal here is to have the kick and snare stand out appropriately and not get completely eaten up into the background. So here I have the kick and the snare drum routed to a bus, and I've inserted the Transient Shaper plugin. And then after it, I just have a trimmer plugin to make sure that the overall output volume is the exact same as it would be if these plugins were disengaged. Just in case you're new, you do this in order to make sure that you're not fooling yourself by having a volume increase when the plugins are engaged, which can trick you into thinking that it sounds better, when in fact, the volume just went up. Okay, so I'll just play the song back a little bit without the plugins. Okay, it sounds pretty good, but I want to get the initial attack of the snare and the kick to poke out of the speakers a little bit more. And whenever I'm testing out a new plugin, I just scroll through the presets to see if there's one that's appropriate for the song I'm working on. And then I came across this one called The Wall, and then I just tweaked the parameters from there. So this first knob called Transient pretty much just adjusts the overall output of the detected transients. Then we have Warmth here, which adds sort of like an emulated saturation device. And then the focus area, from the manual, it says it narrows the frequency range being processed, also impacts the sidechain signal being used for detection. It sort of thins out the higher up you get in the frequency range. So yeah, leaving it around 80 hertz is good because it won't process that ridiculous low end, but it leaves it nice and full sounding. And then if you want to elongate the tail end of your waveform, then you would raise up the sustain. So let's turn that all the way down and then all the way up. See how that affects the sound. This section also has its own dedicated focus control. Then this time knob is a little unique in that you can focus in on how long you want the transient detector to stay open. I just ended up leaving it in the middle for this track. But then also you have these three buttons over here, which routes this knob to different sections of the plugin. basically it places this knob either before or after the transient and sustain sections. So for a much more pronounced effect, you could route it to the transient, or the sustain. And then you might be asking yourself why I went full bore with the transient knob and the warmth knob. And it's because you can mix this effect in overall with your dry effect, which is always great to have on a modern plugin. So I just ended up blending 39% of this signal in with my dry signal. So again, here's without the Transient Shaper. With it. And then in the context of the mix. With it out. So it brings the kick and the snare to the front as opposed to putting it in the back. Okay, next we're going to focus on these two guitars playing in unison, just meaning that they're doubling the same part. And what I want to portray here is that there's some irritating peaks or plucks coming through on the guitars. And the goal for this song is to create a nice, somewhat soothing environment, and nobody wants to hear something like that. So let's see what we can do. There's a flood in my heart, and in my head there's a scar. At small towns from midnight. So especially on those da da da, it's kind of poking at my ear a little bit. Now you could say, why not just solve that with like a tape emulation or a compressor? But this type of specialized tool handles the job a little bit better. And then you could even add this either before or after a tape emulation or a traditional compressor. So all I'm doing on it is I'm going to reduce the transient knob. So the default position is at 0, and I'm just going to pull it down to around -5. So let's focus in on that da da da. And I'm just going to take the guitars we're focusing on and I'm going to pan them right down the middle so that we can really hear what's going on. So again, here's with no effect. And now here's with the Transient Shaper, just cutting off those transients. Listen to it in place, and then I'll unmute the other guitar and the vocals. There's a flood in my heart, and in my head there's a scar. At small towns from midnight till dawn, awake we are. Great, not only did that tame those peaks, it also made those two guitars playing in unison more cohesive with each other, meaning that the pick attacks on each individual guitar note aren't fighting with each other. They're not pinging off of each other. And this is a good example of just showing what one knob can do to solve a problem that might be a little bit more complex with a different type of processor. All right, so for this particular track, those are the two issues that come to mind that this new Slate plugin helped me solve. So I think I'm going to add some room sound to the kick and snare to place them in the mix a little better, and maybe a notch EQ filter on the guitar because there's still some harshness on one or two notes in particular. But it's always great to get about 80% of the way there with just a few simple twists of some virtual knobs. Honestly, I haven't been excited about a Slate Digital mix rack product in a while now. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm not a fan of subscription models or iLok or Slate's sometimes gimmicky, famous producer endorsed plugins. And in terms of perpetual licenses, I appreciate the loyalty discounted tier model of a company like Acoustica Audio, over the static $149 per plugin route that Slate has chosen to go. However, I keep my Slate subscription going because once in a while they release something that's dead easy to use and just works without fuss. And that really can't be said for a company like Acoustica. So it looks like there's always going to be a trade-off somewhere. Anyways, if you like how this song is sounding so far and want to see how it develops, or if you want to see some more reviews of music tools and plugins, then stay tuned, like, and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.